Surprise at the end. See John.
Yes.
So the last 4 or 5 weeks we've talked about, things that we can do every day. Maybe some of those resonate with you, maybe some feel harder. Today, I'm talking more about things that you would do on a more periodic basis. And the 3 topics that I'm going to cover are retreats, spiritual direction, and dream work. So, how many people here have been on a retreat of some sort? Why'd you go?
God. Seeking the living spirit.
Seeking. Mm-hmm.
You just needed some quiet, period.
Yeah. Amen.
To grow.
To grow, yeah.
Had to.
Yeah.
I was at St. Louis University, and every student had to make a retreat.
There you go. Yep. I've been there. Well, so I thought I would talk about one specific retreat experience that I had and how they've become important in my life. And so when I was 27 years old, I had just graduated from MBA school. I was really full of a lot of things, ambition, myself. And my father, who was a deacon at St. Ignatius, where I ended up growing up after they grew off of St. Edward's, gave me as a present for my MBA an all-expense-paid 5-day silent retreat at the Jesuit Spirituality Center in Grand Coteau, Louisiana. So I opened this gift and I thought, well, this is a bunch of bullshit. So I took that card and I stuck it in a drawer. And what was already happening in my life that I wasn't quite feeling yet.
Did you write the time down, John?
Yeah. Was that I was really grinding really hard. I was going to school at night. I was working really hard, traveling a lot. I was living in San Antonio, Texas, for Division of Alcoa, and all our plants were in Mexico. So if I wasn't traveling, I was studying or I was working, and really just beginning to get worn out. So by the time a year passed, I pulled that thing out of the drawer and said, maybe I should go do this. And so I showed up, and retreats, I think, are one thing that Catholics are particularly good at. I showed up to the Jesuit Spirituality Center, which is 100, maybe 200 years old. The current building isn't, because the first one burned. The current building, I think, is 1905. It was started by the Jesuits, and Grand Coteau is in the middle of nowhere. It's vaguely close to Lafayette, Louisiana, which is a small town in its own right. But they've been forming Jesuits there, in that place for 200 years. So you go to they have a marvelous cemetery, and if you've been to monastic cemeteries, they're often marble, all the same size marble headstones, rows and rows, just generations of people who have given their life to serving God. Who's been to the Vatican? So if you walked up those steps in the Vatican that are so old that the marble is worn down from people going up those stairs, same thing in this retreat center. You go up the back staircase, it's marble, and it's worn down because so many people have gone up those steps. And so for me, going to those sacred places, you can feel a presence of God that is different than you can feel in your daily life. And it's the place, it's the space where so many people have come before you to be with God. It is certainly the removal from your own daily life. When I got there, we had a check. So what I didn't even, and this is hilarious, I did no research. I didn't even know what was coming, like what I was going to be doing at this retreat. Well, the Jesuits do versions of the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius, but the entire retreat is in silence. Except for 1 hour a day, you meet with the spiritual director, and you can go to Mass, you can sing at Mass, but other than that, it's silent. So I got there, you get there on a Sunday night, you can go at different times, but I got there on a Sunday night. They have a little orientation for about 30 minutes, silence starts, so it's come out of the orientation, it's like 8 o'clock. I went to sleep and slept through breakfast. I was so tired, didn't even really know it. Met with the spiritual director the first day and just sort of poured out what was a lot of pain that I'm not sure I even knew was there. And I have heard hundreds of these, right? And the way is that they give you 3 or 4 scripture passages to do Lectio Divina with. And that's your whole assignment for the next 24 hours, which for someone who's 27 and been like driven by calendars and to-dos, it's absolutely terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. But in that 5-day retreat, I had a real experience of the presence of God. Since then, I've gone back 7 times. I've gone to a couple different Jesuit places, but this is my home. This is my vacation home, if you will. And I found through retreat what my way of relating to God is. I learned Lectio Divina there. I found out that silence is my favorite thing. And so I go back on a regular basis. For a while, it was once every 2 years, unintentionally like clockwork. It seemed like the world would rebuild up in me, and I would need to go back. Thankfully, my wife is very supportive of this. So even when we had small kids, I would go for 5 days. And somebody asked her, I said, "Well, how can you deal with that? How can you let him, take half his vacation time for the year?" She said, "Well, he's a much better person when he gets back." So that's probably fair, It reminds me of Bill Curry, who coached at Alabama when I was in school there. One of my favorite, he gave a FCA talk, and one of my favorite quotes of his is, he played for Vince Lombardi. And he said when he graduated college and got drafted by the Packers, he couldn't wait to go play for Vince Lombardi. He said, "It's an incredible coach. This man goes to Mass every day." He said, "I went to the first practice and I realized this man needs to go to Mass every day." So it's interesting, that retreat, I didn't have to go. I certainly had no intention of going on a retreat. And what's interesting is I had a great experience at Search in high school when I was at Father Ryan. And so, but in the intervening, 8 or 9 years, I was so focused on other things in my life that I forgot, that sort of need that I have to go away and to be on retreat. So anyway, I put a few resources in here. These are all places that either John or I have been. I'm sure some of you have been to Gethsemane in Kentucky. And if you've been there and heard the monks chant the hours at 3:30 in the morning, it's good stuff. Maybe I ask the group, what other things come to mind for you guys when you think about retreats?
I wanted to add, I've been to Gethsemane, but I just wanted to add Sisters of Loretto to the list, because they're at they're at Northbrook, Kentucky. They're just down the road.
Thank you.
From
Yeah.
Gethsemane, and it has this really female presence that's comforting that I don't find in some of the other retreat centers.
Yeah, there's also a great one in Coleman.
Yes, it's.
Do you remember the name of the one in Coleman?
Sacred Heart.
Sacred Heart, thank you.
And there's a wonderful woman who leads that now.
That's a great place.
And then there's also, we're from Arkansas, and there's St. Scholastica in Fort Smith. I don't know if you know Makrina Whitaker, but she
Mm-mm.
just died and she was there.
Mm.
And it's a wonderful retreat.
So are the retreats for women only?
Oh, gosh, no.
At those?
Lots of women only. And the nice thing is they have hermitages that are out in the middle of nowhere, but on their property.
So the one in Coleman does too?
They do have hermitages,
Oh,
yeah.
great, thanks.
Yeah. So I love retreats, and I have one of those supportive spouses
Who would enjoy being in silence in a hermitage? Yes. Wow. Look at this. I came back on fire after that retreat and immediately recommended to my friend, told him he had to go, and he went, absolutely hated it. So I never recommended it to anybody after that, because I think you kind of, I think silence is a thing. And some people are less comfortable with it, but it is amazing to me. And it still happens when I go back. Like, it takes about a day and a half of being quiet, being silent before the world. Like, I don't think I forget. I don't realize, like, right now how much buildup of the world is in my head. What I'm going to do next, what I got to do tomorrow, this is going on with my wife, this is going on with my friend, blah, blah, blah. And it takes about a day and a half, this tank just sort of empties. And then you're like really quiet. And it's a weird feeling, it's a great feeling. And then
The benefit of Gethsemane is there's almost no cell signal.
yes, yes, yeah. And then, I can remember some of the most painful experiences are getting back in the airport after 5 days and turning the email on. And you're just like, wow, okay, So reentry can be difficult for sure. I think that's kind of all I wanted to say about retreats. What else?
I just wonder, has anyone done a Camino?
Ooh.
Yeah, it's on my list.
So my sister-in-law, brother-in-law, met his wife on the Camino. And she ended up, my sister-in-law wrote a book about that experience.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
11 kilometers, that's it.
Yeah. So you know what the Camino, everybody knows what the Camino is? I vaguely know what it is. It's a journey through Spain along the way of St. James, right? And there's this whole story about how she was supposed to start 2 days before, but missed her flight, and ended up starting at the same time he did. Wild stuff.
I know, I can't remember, Father Beckman at St. Henry.
Father Beckman.
Beckman has done the Camino.
Mm.
I sort of want to go by myself, but I'm a little intimidated to go by myself as well. Do you think Christ the King would ever do?
Ooh, that'd be fun.
Yeah. It would be interesting. I did it by myself, and in hindsight, regretted it. It really only picked up for me when I met a couple guys from Poland, and they were like, "We need to be with you," and I said, "No, I'm having a spiritual experience." And I said, "Well, we're gonna follow you anyway." And I needed people, and that was where I was at the time. But it would be interesting because it's really nice to have people. When you walk at your own pace, and that's kind of the spiritual rigor of it. Trying to find the pace that works for you to be able to pray, if that's what you're doing, or see, and different people walk at different paces. So a group works best when you know where you're going to start that day and you know where you're going to end, but you can let go of necessarily having to be. But it's really nice to gather together and have a meal, and wash your clothes together, and so I could see, maybe, and Father Dexter probably might do this. He likes to walk. I think he would prefer to bike it, but that's cheating. But I could see a small group, maybe 12 to 15 people.
And you can do sections of it, like you could go for a few days or a week or 2 weeks.
Could.
Yeah.
Father
Dude.
Vaughn
there's something to be said for doing the whole thing.
But that's like 2 months?
I did it in 40 days.
Wow.
That was taking my time.
Wow.
People did it in 30. If you do like 20 miles a day, you could do it in 30.
And I think
That's a
if
lot.
Let's do the Portuguese, you can do the Portuguese.
Yeah, you can.
or
Right.
The Portuguese part.
Yeah.
I started on the French side of the Pyrenees.
Oh, wow.
That's still
but-
one.
Yeah, it was the worst day was the first day. Yeah, I'd be interested in finding out if we could put together something.
Sounds good.
Yeah, Mary and I have talked about doing that after the kids go to college maybe, but we talk about doing a lot of things after the kids go to college. It's a long list.
When did you ever thank your father?
Oh, I did. And, you know, I think that before he passed, I went on another 4 or 5 times, so I think he knew what it meant to me. And but yeah, it's I now know what fathers go through. You know, I've got 2 teenagers, so I certainly, yeah, what a gift, right? What a gift. So the second topic, you know, sort of came for me out of that first retreat, which is spiritual direction. And because of how meaningful that process was to me, I took their suggestion and immediately got a spiritual director, and have had a spiritual director pretty much since then. There have been some times where I've been between them because a relationship either ended or the person moved, you know, the director moved away, whatever. But I came out of that retreat really, you know, wanting to have those important conversations with people, and just how much it had meant to me and does mean to me when I go back and sit with a director, and I have a director here in Nashville. So I wanted to say, how many people have gone to a spiritual director? Oh, quite a few. Yeah. So you know that it's not counseling, it's not therapy. You know, obviously, for those of you who haven't been, there is sharing of your life. But there's not a goal to process something or to fix something or to get past something. I think of it more like when I'm in a good place with direction, and it's not. And direction is a misnomer, as Thomas Merton would say, or Henry Nouwen would say. We're not directing the other person. We're really just, it's space where you're sitting with somebody to talk about what's going on, talk about your prayer life and your relationship with God, just to bounce that off of somebody else. And just, it's kind of like, I don't know, I think of a personal trainer for the gym, or I think about a tour guide. You know, I have this image of myself as like, you know, you go on the jungle safari at Disney World, the Animal Kingdom, and there's like the person in the front of the van, and they know where all the animals are, and they sort of point out where things are, and that's kind of what I see my role as sometimes, is coming in and being with this person, because all of us, and those of us who are directors, when we go to our director, we fail to see sometimes where God is working in our life and the things that are going on because of the emotions that are there. And so having someone else sit with us and go through that, you know, it can be very helpful. So those of you who have been to direction, what's been your experience? Or,
Revelation.
Revelation.
Yeah, every time I go, it's something I didn't know coming out.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's a person allowing me the space to do that, making maybe a few observations, mostly just asking questions. But that's been it's surprising right now, even as I talk about it. It's always just been a surprise to me. And that deepens my relationship with God.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's the questions, and it's also sometimes my director will just say something that I said back to me.
Yeah.
I just heard you say this, and I'd be like, okay. I wasn't even aware that I said that and what's going on there. Yeah.
I think it's insight, and for me, there was confirmation of some things I was thinking deep inside of me, but,
Yeah.
needed someone to help me voice that or
Yeah.
speak that.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us on our spiritual journey, when we think we're experiencing something or have a certain insight, just bouncing that off another perspective can keep us sort of in the right direction, or even, like I said, even hearing things that you say out loud, I don't know, that's kind of suspect.
I think for me it's related. I've had, though I haven't sought it out for this, getting permission in certain ways, which is interesting because spiritual directors don't have, authority.
Right.
But sometimes we have an idea of the spiritual life that matches what we've read, the saints we want to be, or the people we want to avoid being, and that's all external. But then in the silence, we discover a very different kind of voice in life. And for me, getting permission, that's the word I'm sticking to for now anyway, to let that be okay and to not necessarily follow all of the rules or the things that I thought it was supposed to be, it was free. It's been very freeing.
Absolutely.
Might ask me, what's going on in your life today or this week? So it's always based on current jibber jabber that comes out of my mouth. And then what he'll do sometimes, that's how I ended up going on my silent retreat. It's been a while since you've been on a retreat, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I say that sometimes.
So then you end up going somewhere you didn't even think you were going to go, but at the end of the hour, whatever it is, damn, I needed to go there.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
The discovery that can be made by a person on the sideline that knows a whole lot more than I do.
I was going to say, I have been a spiritual director since 2009 and get to work with Richard and Rose is having a spiritual director. Others may be, but I want to say this. I feel like I need to say it. I've never had a direction session when Spirit doesn't speak to me about my life through somebody I'm with.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the greatest gift and incredibly humbling and surprising is the best way to say it. So it just keeps working as a circle. That's phenomenal.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Since we're all lay people here, and I know we've talked about this, but oftentimes people will come, and it's often young people, but not always, and they will very specifically want a priest for spiritual direction. Sometimes they'll be satisfied with like a Dominican, but this is, the thought for some of getting spiritual direction from just like a normal person, without any of the powers or whatever, they don't want that. So I was wondering if anyone has any insight. I've never really had a good response to that, other than
I don't have a good response either. Because I'm sort of the funnel, I'm on the my email's on the website. So if anybody at Christ the King is interested in direction, they email me. And what I will do in response to that is I send like a brief questionnaire. Just tell me how old you are, what do you do, why do you want to be in direction, have you been in direction before? There's a couple other questions. And they will often respond and say, is Father Dexter available? And what's interesting to me is Father Dexter doesn't believe that his gift is spiritual direction. Now, I've been running with him in the mornings for about 11 years, and I can tell you that I have received a lot of spiritual direction on those runs, although he doesn't call it that. Father Fan doesn't do spiritual direction either, and so people they'll disappear if a priest is not available. And I think what Dexter would say, just a minute, Rose, I think what Dexter would say about that is, it's more about whether a person is gifted to be a director than whether or not they're a priest. And he avoids doing direction specifically. He's like, I'm not good at it, and so I'm not going to do it. And so anyway, that's I think that's his perspective on it. But I also think that, it's very useful. One of my gifts is to be able to, because I'm a business person, a financial person, to be with people in business, with their issues in business. And it's directors who have kids, helpful for them to relate to directees who have kids. So there are a lot of other gifts with lay people in direction. So, Rose.
I had one person come to me that might be of this vein, and I think she was looking for, her prior spiritual directors had been a nun and a priest.
Mm-hmm.
And when I explained how I did spiritual direction, she wanted me to tell her what to do.
Yeah.
And she wanted very
I have-
specific,
yeah.
like, is this right or is this wrong?
Yeah.
And I said, that's not I'm not gonna tell you what's right or wrong, I'm not gonna tell you, I'm gonna listen.
Yeah.
And she didn't get that. She was like, well, how am I gonna know what to do then if I?
I've had the same experience, and I've had some directees come to me for 1 or 2 sessions, and then when I won't tell them what to do, they don't come back.
They fire us.
Yeah. They don't set the next appointment, and that's fine. I think, I will, if someone says I need a program, or I need, give me some ideas of things to do in my prayer life, I will provide some things. Like, as an example, I'll listen to what goes on in that hour, and then I may say, you know what, I'll send you some verses to do Lectio with that I think relate to this situation that you're in. So I may follow up with an email, or maybe here's a book that might relate to what you're going through. I'll do some of that, but that's kind of as far as, really everybody's responsible for, working out their own salvation with fear and trembling, right? As the Psalms say. So it's not my place, it's my place to be an aid, to be an assistant for you to find your path. But it's a dangerous place to start telling somebody where to go on their spiritual journey.
One thing, it's kind of parallel. I've been in a 12-step recovery program for a minute, and
Yeah.
it's very faith-based.
Oh, yeah.
And so, just like you said, I've been through a situation, and this is, something that, I'm not an expert in it, and I'm not an expert in life or counseling, but I've been through that.
Yeah.
And sharing them. And when I talk to my sponsor, it is often prayer and something back.
Yeah.
So, that's still, like you said, share intimate things about your life that most people don't know. So that's kind of akin to that. It's not.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, if anybody who's not familiar with the Big Book,
Yep.
This is a spiritual document that came from God.
And it's based.
It is an amazing piece of work.
Based on James.
Yeah.
And Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah, it's quite powerful. Yeah.
Rose said it was part of her training, and it
Hmm.
wasn't in mine, and I think it should be. Because I see so many people who.
I helped run a addiction treatment company for 9 years, and I still invest in and sit on the boards of a couple. And so early on in working, I decided just out of curiosity to read the Big Book, and I just was blown away. It is a powerful spiritual document, no doubt.
Well, I want to say, I don't want to talk too much, but one of my very first directees came to me for 7 years. So this is how direction works. She came for 7 years. At the end of a session, she said to me, my husband, who's a prominent Episcopalian priest around the world, is an alcoholic. So that's it's one of the many ways it dovetails, and also how direction works, because it's that doorknob confession, and it changed everything for us. And she wouldn't have felt comfortable saying that for 7 years.
For 7 years.
And so now I've sat with her through her divorce and recovery from divorce. Yeah, so that's direction. I feel like that's just God.
Mm-hmm. Anything else about direction?
I'm curious about how active it is in the parish. Do very many people
Yeah.
seek out that
So
opportunity?
Jim was just asking, we have 6 or 7 volunteers who do direction, of which Robbie is one and Rose is in training. I don't know how many each person has at one time. My guess would be around 30.
Oh, total or?
Total,
Oh, okay,
yeah.
still a lot.
Yeah. I probably get a couple people a month asked by email, and half of them don't respond when I send them the questionnaire. So it's a small number, but it's pretty steady. A lot of young people where I was at 27, sort of gotten into life and then saying, well, okay, wait a minute, what am I doing?
Where's their notice that this is available?
Website.
It's on the website. We don't really talk about it a whole lot, or say much about it in the bulletin or anything.
One of the, in retrospect, things I got out of spiritual direction was the ability to be a good listener, or at least a better listener, because I was fortunate enough to have a Jesuit who was a spiritual director, and there were times when I went in and just rattled off what was bothering me for 30 minutes, and at the end of that, he would be quiet and ask me one simple question, and it was just like somebody shot me in the middle of the head, because that gave me the ability to answer all my questions. But it's a great trait. I'm not very good at it, but he certainly made me better, I think.
That reminds me of a famous spiritual direction session that Henry Nouwen wrote about. Henry Nouwen got a chance to meet Mother Teresa one-on-one. And so he was all fired up about this and thinking about it for months in advance. And he was going through a lot of stuff in his life. And he finally gets a chance to meet her, and he sits down with her, and he just unloads all of this junk. I'm struggling with this and this and this. And Mother Teresa looks at him and says, well, I'm sure when you spend an hour a day in adoration of your Lord, everything will be okay. And he just, like, he was just like, thank you. Like, I mean, that was his spiritual direction session with Mother Teresa.
Richard, what do people go through it for training to be a spiritual director?
Yeah, so there's, probably 10, 15 programs that I know of around the country. Robbie and I both went through a program that is no longer around. It was in Nashville called Still Point. And it was run by Sister Kathleen Flood and a religion professor at Belmont named Ben Curtis. And so there is the Shalem Institute.
That's where I finally got my
Okay.
degree.
In D.C., which was started by a psychologist named Gerald May and a guy named Tilden Edwards. There's a Hayden Institute in North Carolina, and there's a handful of others. There's an interesting relationship because the Catholic Church does not formally train lay people to be spiritual directors. So if you want to be a director, you have to go to one of these places, and they're typically non-denominational, and there'll be people from a variety of Christian and other. And there's some that are interfaith that don't have that have other faiths too. But Still Point, what we did, it was a 4-year program, and we met on one Saturday a month, and a lot of our training was working with and digesting spiritual masters like Thomas Merton, Henry Nouwen, a lot of Julian of Norwich, a lot of variety of stuff. And then we did dream work. We went through direction, and then we had a couple of years where we had 4 intensive retreats where we would all get together and there'd be speakers. And so we did, and then there's sort of informal practicum after that. When I started direction, Ben Curtis was kind of a supervisor for me for first several years when I was a director, and I still use my director as sort of a supervisor for my, I'll take to him issues that I'm having with directees that I need help with.
So is there a excuse me, John?
Yeah.
Is there a certification then that comes after
That yes,
Okay.
but there's no like central body that recognizes that certification. Like if I showed my certification to the diocese, they would be like, they're like, okay.
The other part of that is some of us, I have a peer group because it's so important that so a peer group of spiritual directors. And so that's what we're required to do that with Shalane. And so when I finished, there wasn't one here and I had to start that. So we kind of keep each other honest that way. And then Richard, we have this loose confederation here, but we could certainly do that.
Mm-hmm.
I have this ongoing group that we're accountable to each other so that we do a group spiritual direction to bring about our issues.
So I did mine I'm completing mine through the Chaplaincy Institute. It's an interfaith.
Mm-hmm.
Because I very much I didn't want it to be just Christian, at least for me. I just wanted to be able
Yeah, sure.
anybody coming along who wants direction. So in my program, we did a lot of, so we touched on Sufism, Hinduism, all
Mhm.
kind of major religions in the world. And so in my group, there were people who were and there was a Wiccan, there were people from all sorts of different backgrounds. So it was really interesting to see people's faith and also how many people have been traumatized by their religion.
Oh,
That
yeah.
was shocking, because I think I was me and one other person were probably the only people who were I didn't have that much baggage from my religion.
Yeah, I think of it as kind of like language and culture. The most important thing for finding director is finding somebody who sort of speaks the same spiritual language that you do. I think they don't have to be the same denomination, but you have to have enough in common with them that you can talk openly about your prayer life and about your experience of God and feel like that person's relating to you. So.
There is a program through Great University.
Oh, yeah?
For spiritual directors.
Mm.
Father Joe McMahon went through that program.
Oh,
And he
love
does,
Father Joe.
He does retreats twice a year.
I've
for
shown
5
up.
days,
I've shown up
3
at the
days.
same time with him at the Jesuit Spirituality Center, without us coordinating.
Yeah.
Hey,
So there,
Father
and I
McMahon.
don't know if it's specifically Catholic, but the people that because I've been on a couple of his retreats.
Mm-hmm.
He used to have them at the Mercy Convent, but then they got too big for that space, and now I think he goes out to the Bethany.
That's right.
Retreat center.
Yeah, that's a great point. If you were interested in the Jesuit flavor, through Holy Family, they do at least a couple of retreats a year out there with the spiritual exercises. And Janice Lavecchio, who is the director of adult formation out there, who's also on our director list, she is, I think, maybe right now, making a 30-day spiritual exercises retreat, which is sort of like the graduation ceremony of silent retreats, which all Jesuits, before they go in, make a 30-day retreat, which 30 days of silence is just, that's amazing. Well, let's move to dreams. We have about 15 minutes. So the last topic, now who has worked with dreams? It's very often a much smaller group of people than direction. So I was introduced to dream work during my spiritual direction training and have been doing it off and on for the last 20 years. And basically what it is it may not be what you've heard about dreams. Some of the stuff written on dreams would be like, okay, you can get a book, and if you see a tree in a dream, the tree means this, right? Well, that's really not the way that Carl Jung would have taught it, or our friend Freud would have taught it, or some of the real dream work the Hayden Institute also does a lot of dream work certification. And the way that they think about dream work is every dream that you have is personal to you, and the meaning that comes out of that dream is yours. So when a tree shows up in a dream, the question to ask is, what do trees mean to me? What might that be going on in my life that tree relates to? And so what we do in the dream group is we go through a process where we hear the dream from the dreamer, usually twice, and then we ask questions about the dream, just trying to pull out all of the details that the dreamer can remember. And often when they tell it the first time, they remember about half of what they will end up remembering once you ask them questions. And then once you get through with that, you ask interpretive questions. And the interpretive questions are more like, okay, John Stott showed up in your dream. Give me 3 or 4 words about John. What does John mean to you? Well, John's kind of this overbearing,
Monster.
aggressive, dogmatic. No.
Beware.
Right. And in the process of those questions, it will become obvious, not obvious, but many things will become clear about what that dream means to you. And then when you're done with those, the group will say back to the dreamer, well, if it were my dream, I would be thinking about this. And that is an incredibly powerful phrase, if it were my dream, because it keeps you from projecting what you think that dream should mean to the person who had the dream. It invites them to hear what you think it means, and they can decide for themselves, no, that ain't it. Or, oh man, that really does connect. Yeah, I see. And so the process, and so then finally the dreamer sort of reflects ahas that they have had through that process. And I can tell you that that I've had some of the most direct experiences of God's presence working with people's dreams. And on the second page, there's a guy named Jeremy Taylor who's no longer with us, but he was a psychologist who sort of built on Jung and Freud and created the process that I just described of working with dreams. And he wrote down these 10 assumptions about dreams, which I think are useful to read and think through. And I don't know if Freud would have agreed with all of these. I think Jung might have. But here's what Jeremy believed. All dreams come in service of health and wholeness. No dream comes to tell the dreamer what he or she already knows. Only the dreamer can say with certainty what meanings his or her dream may hold. The dreamer's aha of recognition is a function of previously unconscious memory and is the only reliable touchstone of dream work. There's no such thing as a dream with one meaning. All dreams speak a universal language of metaphor and symbol. All dreams reflect inborn creativity and ability to face and solve life's problems. All dreams reflect society as well as the dreamer's relationship to it. Working with dreams regularly improves relationships with friends, lovers, partners, parents, children, and others. And working with dreams in groups builds community, intimacy, and support, and has a positive impact on society. And so, when I think about, there's lots of dreams in the Bible, right? And so one of the dreams that I always think about is the dream that came to Joseph to leave when Herod was about to kill the oldest born children. And God, an angel came to Joseph in a dream and said, get out. And, I sort of imagine, when I relate that to our dreams and dream work, and I'm not someone who thinks that dreams are predictive, like they're going to tell you what's going to happen, but if you put yourself back in that time and think about Joseph, you can imagine the tension that was probably around the city at that time. You can imagine that he had heard things about what Herod might be thinking about this child that was born. He had met with the wise men. So this dream that came to him, it could have been an angel that actually spoke to him in the dream, and it could have also been his unconscious sense of all these things that were happening. And the angel was a form in the dream from God saying, alerting him to what was already happening. And I think this is a way that dreams work with us, that we have a dream, and there's something there that our unconscious knows that we haven't sensed yet about what is going on with us. And it could be a number of things. And for example, I have a recurring dream in my life. And this, I've probably had it, 10 or 15 times over the last 20 years. And the dream is always that I am going back to school to get another degree. Okay? I'm going back to Alabama, which is where I went to college, to get a doctorate in finance, which is something that I've thought about before. And so it's a combination. But what I've noticed is the dream shows up when I am about to learn something. Something is going on in my life. It has been something's changing with one of my kids. It has been a new work challenge is showing up, and for whatever reason I haven't recognized that consciously. And now, when I have that dream, I sort of go, okay, what's going on? And I'm telling you, there'll be something there that I need to pay attention to, that I need to learn. So I think that's more often how dreams work than predictively telling us that something's going to happen or being. And when I go work with one of my dreams in a group, it's terrifying. It's like that first day of a silent retreat. Almost always I have no idea what the dream means. Without fail, after the work is done, there's a powerful insight there for me about what's going on in my life and something that I need to do. So that's kind of dream work. Questions about dream work?
We never remember our dreams.
Yeah. So, couple things that will help you if you put a notepad by your bed. First of all, amazingly, if you just say, I want to remember my dreams and think about it every day, you will start to remember your dreams. And if you send me an email, I can send you, there's a great article I have on techniques to remember your dreams. But my go-to is I keep a pad and pencil by the bed. And so if I wake up, I don't have to write the whole dream down, but if I just write a sentence or two, I was in the mountains and this happened in the dream. When I get up in the morning, I'll remember a lot of the rest of the dream. Just one sentence prompt is all I really need to. There's other practical things like alcohol inhibits your dreams. The more REM sleep that you get, typically it'll be easier to remember dreams. So if you're working out and you're more tired when you go to the deeper sleep, you will more often remember dreams. But I think mostly, and there are times where I feel like I'm not remembering any dreams, and I just say I really want to. If I say every day I really want to try to remember a dream, and I have that intention to write it down, something will invariably come.
What about alarm clocks?
What about alarm clocks?
I've woken up to an alarm clock most of my life. So if there's any dream there, it's
Yeah. Probably.
yeah.
Do you not remember any dreams at all?
Some,
Okay.
but usually it's remember the alarm clock.
Anything else about dreams? Well, we have a group on Wednesday nights. There's about 11 of us. My email is there at the bottom if you have any interest in doing that. We typically break into groups of 5 or 6 each. So it's small group work because you want everybody to have the opportunity to ask questions and really, and usually, we meet for 2 hours, and it takes about 45 minutes to work a dream. So we will open with some gathering and a prayer. We'll break into groups. We'll do one dream, have a break, then do another dream. And some people just want to do one a night. So they may come for the first half or the second half. Totally fine. And then we do a second dream, and so we do it 6 to 8 p.m. on a Wednesday night, and we may start another one if we continue to build interest. We've only met this. We started this group this year, so that we'll have our 4th meeting in April. So we meet once every 4 or 5 weeks is usually a good rhythm. So, all right, good stuff. So that's really all I had. Any other thoughts or questions? We've got about 5 minutes. Yeah.
I just want to jump back to Steve's question about where is this information? When I saw your name on the list for this group on prayer, it was the first I knew of a spiritual director, coordinator, whatever, at the parish, and I feel like I am kind of in the know about what's going on here. Also, I made Curcio a long time ago, and they really encourage you to get a spiritual director, but there's no, like, where to go to find this person unless it's a priest, which a lot of people go to a priest. But I relate to what Robbie was saying about being more comfortable with women for retreat and other things. And so I've just never pursued it because I've never been able to find anybody or any information.
Well,
where is it on the website?
I mean, it's under adult formation opportunities.
yes,
It's
it
there,
is.
But, websites are labyrinthine and difficult. One of the interesting things I've found about this parish, and I've been here for about 10 years, but only really worked here for 5. There's a lot of layers here. There are pockets of people doing things that you'd never even hear about. And it seems to be a very busy place, with the liturgy.
I just found out there's a knitting group.
There's a knitting group, right. And so and the tendency here seems to be something, think of like an archipelago, or islands of people who meet one another and they do their own thing. But you can go 5-10 years without realizing that there are these. And so I've seen it as one of my goals as I learn more and more about the parish, finding these layers and saying, okay, here, we have spiritual directors now. Richard and I only met like a couple of years ago, and I've been here forever, and I'd done spiritual direction here, that's given it, but we were just never put in touch. So over the next year especially, but following up with this group, I'm hoping to shoot some videos with Father Dexter where he talks about his experiences of direction and points to these resources, because I think when he says stuff, people listen. And just really, Holy Family is a place where I think it's part of their ethos. It's part of their feeling. You go to Holy Family and you get connected to retreats and all this thing. I'd like to see Christ the King become that too. We do a lot. We're known for lots of stuff, but sort of the spiritual life isn't necessarily one of them. That's not because there aren't lots of people here who have vibrant, active spiritual lives. It's just that we don't always know where that's happening. So
I think this is part of how this series came about.
Yes.
For John and I.
Yes.
Is to talk about more of these, prayer practices, and there, like you said, what gets talked about most often is the service opportunities, which is great, room in the inn and all those kind of things. So we don't talk as much about these things.
Richard, different question. How back to spiritual direction, how would you relate spiritual direction and confession?
Yeah, not the same thing. Yeah. I think when you go to a director, there can be.
My question is probably more about confession. I'm sorry.
I mean, when you go to director, there certainly can be an element of confessing things, and there can be an element of feeling God's forgiveness. In that setting, it is not the same thing as confession. And a lot of there are people I think that say they want to go to a priest for direction that really are talking about confession.
But I guess maybe I'm pushing, I'm realizing, do you see confession as a spiritual practice, I guess?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
I go to a priest, and after I'm done dumping my load, then I get to talk about confession.
If any of you write, if you're writers, or if you, have ways of presenting these kinds of things, your thoughts about the spiritual life, your experiences of spiritual direction, and you're willing to share, send your material to me. I mean, putting it on the website, putting it in the emails, just letting people know, not just that these things are happening, but seeing them in action, I think can be a really, really nice way of featuring what's going on here.
Yeah.
I did a silent retreat at Ann University Center in Louisville, through the Interpretive Questions. But after the silent retreat, I wrote a little piece, because we had, it's kind of like the register, I guess,
Yeah.
for Catholics, but it's called the Record in Louisville.
Hmm.
And you could anyone could just write in and say, so I did a little piece on the silent retreat. And just
Nice.
I did it at Angel Mercy Center so that they would get more people going there, because people didn't really know in the diocese that this was an opportunity.
I love that.
You can also look at our profiles, because it says a whole lot about what direction you is through those profiles.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And so that would be a nice way to repackage some
Yeah,
done stuff.
So when someone inquires about direction, I send the questionnaire, but I also send the profiles of the volunteer directors. And I chose not to put those on the website. I'm not sure everybody wants their profile on a website. But I have those. If you want those, email me and I'll send you those.
Maybe, excuse me, maybe an article in the Oyster about the availability of the service.
Yeah, that'd be good too, yeah.
Well, Richard told me a couple of weeks ago, I think I had this right, that when you Google spiritual direction in Nashville,
We're the second one that
we
comes
come
up.
because the diocese doesn't really give out names of people.
Yeah.
And so we come up, and so I've gotten one person through Richard who actually is Catholic. Everybody else is from a different faith system.
Yeah, and this may be part of the reason it's not more advertised.
Which is nice.
We're not formally commissioned by the church. So, the diocese is not going to say, if somebody calls the diocese, they're not ever going to say, oh, call Richard Rodgers about direction.
But years ago, we had Julie O'Connor down at the
Yeah.
cathedral, and somebody paid for her to do that in adult education.
That's right.
And so you could just go to Julie all day long on Monday if you scheduled. There's a people who Julie was there, but that was about it.
Yeah, and I think Janice at Holy Family has a similar setup where Holy Family supports her giving direction specifically. Yeah.
I forgot Janice.
But that's more the exception than the rule.
And I don't know if, like, both of the people that I direct right now are ones in Baltimore and the other ones in Chicago. So I don't know if there's an element of anonymity as well. Of course, neither of them are, well, it's Catholic. But I don't know if people are comfortable coming to someone that they also can see in their own parish. I don't know.
That's a good question. I think some people do prefer some separation in that relationship. That's interesting. I think it's a personal preference. Some people may not want a director that they're sitting in mass with all the time, or their kids are going to school with. I don't know. I've never really had a problem with that, one way or the other. The director they have now is not Catholic and not here, but that's sort of a prior relationship from Still Point. Doesn't have anything to do with whether he's here or not.
Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just like to stop and go over
Go to
here.
mass. Yep.
Yeah.